By the time Ethan dropped out of high school the day he turned 16, he had 4 business cards. One for a lawn mowing business, a bicycle messenger service, a VCR and television repair service, and a Pittsfield, heart of the Berkshires, information hotline. Pittsfield was more the liver of the Berkshires, with the General Electric plant pumping the bile, and Ethan rarely receiving calls on his hotline. But his other endeavors turned over handy profits. His 16th year, he made more money than his mother, who now worked the night shift at Dunkin' Donuts. The used scuba diving gear he'd invested in to retrieve golf balls from a pond across the golf course had been paid off twice over just from the sale of the balls. Though he'd nearly drowned on a moonless night when his tank was empty and he was full of beer, unable to tell which way was up. His friend Willis hauled him out.
He went through a tour guiding period, bicycling 15 miles down to Stockbridge to give tours at the Norman Rockwell Museum. Gloria used to take her children there after Jim left, feeling both comforted and shattered by the heartwarming scenes of domestic normalcy. To Glendale to guide visitors at Chesterwood, home of sculptor Daniel French. He was seduced by a trustee in French's studio, who later accused him of chipping the plaster model of the Lincoln Memorial, when in fact she had flailed it over. And to Pittsfield's own Arrowhead, home of Herman Melville. Ethan had a gift for memorizing large chunks of text, which proved useful because he was never able to learn to read well. Ainsley, who had read him thousands of pages since childhood, read him all the literature of these establishments, and he repeated it verbatim with great charm and a grin that endeared him to vacationing New Yorkers. He enhanced his tours with wildly creative and interesting lies. When he was fired from Arrowhead for adamantly arguing against the in-house speculation that it was the distant rounded form of Mount Greylock, seen from the second-story window, that had inspired Melville to write about a whale there. Oh, the fact that he had been on several whaling expeditions had nothing to do with the choice of subject. He gave up tour guiding. The money wasn't that great, and Willis had stopped trying to commit suicide, and now was fooling around with computers. They joined forces.
Whereas Ethan's energies were manic and outwardly directed, Ainsley's were ingrown and unprofitable. As an adolescent, she drifted in a perpetual haze of longing, finding some release in her journal, the occasional poem. She was an unremarkable student, slipping by her teachers unnoticed, aiming primarily for invisibility. Only when defending her brother did her will surge to the forefront. At 14, she railed at the teacher who had scrawled the word moron on one of his rare attempts at writing. In a jailhouse in Danville, New Hampshire, she gave the cop such a headache he let Ethan out of his cell. He'd been arrested for hitchhiking and drinking underage. She'd borrowed Reuben's car to drive up and retrieve him. She went to the house of the 13-year-old kid who was supplying Ethan with pot and acid and smacked him out of that inclination. Only once did she have a major run-in with her mother, over something inconsequential. It was a token gesture of rage, for the most part. Her mother was too deflated to engage in battle. Her sad face already declared, "I have lost."
Throughout her childhood and adolescence, Reuben occasionally took Ainsley to Saturday morning rehearsals at Tanglewood, summer home of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. Several of the musicians remembered Reuben. He'd been first clarinetist, including visiting conductor Leonard Bernstein, who kissed the back of Ainsley's hand. Bernstein was her first love, tanned, aged, Byronic. She sat, 11 years old, transfixed, pigeons cooing above in the open-aired shed, and stared at his impassioned conducting, his expressive hands, his long white hair. At home she practiced the clarinet, shut up in the cake room, imagining him conducting her in Beethoven's Ode to Joy.
In high school, Ainsley joined the track team and was startled to break a short-distance record in her first meet. But she preferred long distance, running the old logging roads up October Mountain, the smell of wet, decaying leaves underfoot, the descent in the dark as the days grew shorter. She eventually quit the team because everyone pressed her to compete and she really didn't want to. Her best friend Helena, whose parents owned Sophia's, a Greek restaurant where Ainsley bussed tables, talked her into joining the school band. Ainsley's bruising crush on the unattainable Mr. Harnett, the music teacher whose witty sarcasm took her breath away, caused far more pain than pleasure. Her junior year, after Helena had graduated and gone off to Smith College, he encouraged Ainsley to take up the oboe. It was a life-changing event. The instrument, which Mr. Harnett rented for her with his own money, the band lacked an oboist and funds, answered her soul's cry for reciprocity. She gave it her breath, and it responded, spoke back to her in plaintive, harrowing notes. Mossy night sounds from deep, moonlit forests. It was harder to play than the clarinet, the reed more complex and strange. She'd stare at it by candlelight as it soaked upside down in a glass of water. She practiced night and day, playing woodwind duets with Reuben, who was gaining weight from all the boxes of Dunkin' Donuts. The old Doberman next door, who had survived being run over by Ethan's Suburban, he apologized to the Grundys, hid in the basement from the unbearable strains. Ainsley composed her own music, traveling boldly and instinctively into uncharted territory. Her newfound voice brought her ashore. By the time she was 19, her haze had lifted, her force field repolarized, she became visible, attractive, acquired sardonic wit. She was accepted into the Boston Conservatory of Music. Mr. Harnett, who, unbeknownst to Ainsley, was deeply in love with her, arranged the audition. But she declined their offer of admission.
In the spring of her senior year, she lost her virginity to an Appalachian Trail through hiker who lost his heart to her and wanted to quit the trail. But she level-headedly convinced him to continue. She'd picked him up hitchhiking into town to buy groceries, and he'd hung around for a month. After he left, every few weeks, she'd send him packages of chocolates and Little Debbies to the next P.O. on the list he'd given her, of post offices that dotted his route down to the Springer Mountain. She addressed the packages to his trail name, Mango Madness. After high school, she worked first at General Electric, then at Grossman's Lumber, then at Canyon Ranch, a $40 million health spa where, as a program director, she set up individual programs for guests including Barbra Streisand, who changed her massage appointments every 10 seconds, and then back at Grossman's Lumber, where she dated the yard foreman. At home, Great Aunt Lou was bedridden, but Reuben, now 83 and recharged by playing duets with Ainsley, joined the community orchestra and was making an effort to comb his hair and to remember to wear his dentures. Gloria was running her own video store set up in business by Ethan, who was making excellent money installing and servicing computers with Willis.
On Thanksgiving morning in the year 2000, Ethan told Ainsley that his 18-year-old girlfriend Kimmy was pregnant and asked her what they should do. Ainsley said that Kimmy should move in with them and have the baby there. Gloria, after her initial shock, grimaced but then warmed to the idea. That evening, with Great Aunt Lou half-heartedly protesting from the second floor, the three of them cleared out the cake room to be the baby's room. They pitched the white boxes out the window and swept the oak floor, exposed for the first time in nearly 50 years. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Reuben, bad indigestion from the creamed onions, Ainsley and Ethan sat down at the kitchen table and wrote their father Jim a letter, advising him that he was going to be grandfather and sending him congratulations.